And these guys are known as the Bamboozle Brothers. They met while attending McMaster University in Hamilton, way back in the 90s. This is partly when Euro games were kind of unknown in quantity. They bonded over a love of video games and movies, only to later find a mutual joy in playing games. Starting with American games like Supremacy and collectible card games like Magic, they were soon introduced to their first batch of games to be imported from Germany by a mutual friend. In an attempt to stay in contact when they were separated by work, Jay and Sen decided to take a stab at making games, like the ones they had enjoyed so much. Games that had a high level of social interaction and required critical decision-making skill with a low luck factor and a reasonable play time. After spending a few years designing and pitching prototypes to various companies, it finally met with success in 2011 with the critically acclaimed Belfort, which is currently hovering within striking distance of 200 on BoardGameGeek.com. They also created the party game Train of Thought. Do you have a box for that one too?
Yes, outside.
Oh, okay. And they have since signed games with Toy Vault, Falsovia, Z-Man, but I guess they pronounce it Z-Man, and Queen. They have this wild and crazy dream of kickstarting a game soon, and self-publishing is kind of scary. Besides the whole game thing, Sen is a pediatric occupational therapist, college professor, martial arts instructor, and a dedicated father and husband, while Jay is a training professional, actor, comedian, writer, and is starting his first stint at the Vancouver Film School, teaching a course in game design this year. So thank you guys so much for being able to join us.
Thank you.
And I guess to get us started, I was wondering if you could tell us a bit about your games. So for those of us who have not yet played them, it would be great to learn a bit about them.
Well, let's start with Train of Thought, I guess. Train of Thought is a party game for, it says 2 to 7. With 2 players, it's a bit more of an activity than a game, but it's still kind of entertaining, so we thought we'd put it at 2 to 7. And it's just a word guessing game in which you're trying to get people to guess a word. And the interesting way it's done is through giving a 3-word clue, where one of the words has to be a word that's on a card, and then the word you're trying to get them to is on a different card that no one sees. And you give a 3-word clue with that word. People try to guess it, which invariably they can't on one clue, and then you have to use one of their words, one of their guesses, as a new word and a new 3-word clue. And you keep doing the 3-word clues until someone guesses the right answer.
Do you want to do an example?
Oh yeah, we can do
an example.
Yeah, great.
We can do an example.
I haven't seen these cards. I didn't know them or anything.
Okay, Sen, you're trying to flip one up. Can you roll the die?
I rolled the die. Okay.
So what? What number?
3.
3. So
yeah.
I don't know if you can see that.
There, right there. That's perfect. Apartment, glove, sock, business jacket. Great.
So number 3. So
Number
sock.
3.
So let's use the word sock and 3 words.
It's sack, actually.
Oh, sack. Sorry.
So I'm trying to get to this one. You can see that at number 3.
Meeting?
Oh,
wait.
Thank you.
Thanks.
No problem. I'm sorry. I was like, maybe people can't see it because the screens are dark in front. I'll stop trying to do helpful things.
So I'd say sack of material.
Cloth.
Cloth with scissors.
Cut.
Yes. And so Jay would get this card that says cut. He'd win that, and then now we have a 2-minute timer, and my goal is to get as many guesses right in 2 minutes, or get my partners to guess as many right in 2 minutes as possible.
So you see, it's a 2-player game. It's fun, like little brain exercise. As 3 or 4, then it's competitive, and you're trying to get more cards than anyone else.
Right. So then it would go from cut to the next word. So I say cut the
Cord.
Oh yeah. Sorry, I have to do 3 words.
You don't have to.
Yeah. Cord you pull.
Switch.
Like
a light switch.
Oh, switch on toilet.
Flush.
Flush in room.
Oh, I'm lost.
I'll get you back.
Bed.
Oh, awesome. Do in bed.
Sleep. That's where I went.
Less than sleep.
Nap.
A good nap.
Rest.
Yes.
Oh,
Nice. Nice.
The other game we made that's been published so far, a game through Tasty Minstrel Games, is this honking thing called Belfort. Belfort is an area majority game, so if you can see on the back, there's this, I can't tell if you can see it or not, this
That's great.
octagonal shaped city, castle that you're building, and you're trying to control the sector by building
More buildings.
inside each sector. So at the end of certain rounds, you're going to score based on how much of the area you're controlling. But to control it, you have to place workers out into the world collecting the classic resources of wood and stone and metal and gold in order to build these things and populate the city with your elves and gnomes and dwarves to make all this kind of stuff happen. Anyways, this is probably our most popular game right now of the two. And it's with great art done by our friend Josh Capel. And yeah, it's right up there with some of the other really hot games right now in the gaming world. So we're pretty proud of this one. It's just been released in Germany and in Poland.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it's kind of a coup for us right now, and we're just happy that it's out there doing as well as it is.
That's great. Congratulations.
Thanks.
I guess at this point I should say that anybody in the room, if you guys have any questions at any time, just holler.
Yeah, 'cause it's more about you than us. We make games already, so we want to try to help you guys if we can.
One of the questions we see every year at Board Game Jam is the idea that, or looking at how people could take a game from the prototype stage to an actually finished project that they could show to potential publishers.
Sure.
I was wondering if you guys could talk a bit about your experiences looking into going from a playable prototype to, well, now being in Poland.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, when we first started doing it, we would take so much time making our prototypes, and we got a corner rounder, like this actual machine that you can kind of punch it rounds the corners. We would put labels on the backs of tiles just so it looked nice, and we would file the tiles down so that we did.
I know. I was someone filing. You didn't file. I filed.
And just because we were like, well, that looks more like a finished game and whatnot. And then we soon realized that...
wow, what a waste of time.
Waste of time, because then you play it and you're like, oh, this has to change. Oh, which means we have to print a whole new tiles. Okay, well, that's just lame. So we soon started to streamline our prototyping into the base expectation or necessity for us is functionality. So it just needs to be playable, and that includes iconography, making sure everything is clear and understanding, and it helps with the gameplay. It doesn't hinder the gameplay.
Right.
So we just try to make that as good as possible. Then we just use clip art and whatever we have to do to get the right images across. And I guess through our game plan, we kind of understand a little bit about layout and a little bit about like what looks good on a card. And you don't want too much text on a card. If this can be an icon, that's better than putting a sentence on a card, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so now we get to a point where, like, I think Belfort went through about 25 different full prototypes. Like, you know, not necessarily start from scratch, but like, okay, let's move this around. Now we've got to print a whole new prototype out. And that's pretty, for any of the gamery games, I think that's around the average 25. Like Akrotiri has 25-ish. Maybe more, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many of you guys are comic book people?
Yeah.
Well, you're two geeks, so you might be comic books.
Us included.
Us included, we're geeks, we read comic books. The number one thing in comic book writing, and Jay has written comic books, and I love comic books, is that first, when you think about comic books, you think about all the glitzy art and all that stuff, but the actual art of writing a comic book is conveying information in an interesting way that will eventually convey the information in the way you wanted it to be. And when you do that in games, it's the same thing. The first job you have to do is convey the information properly on your board, on your cards, and your dice, and your rules, so that the game actually plays right. And in comic book analogy, it would be that the story reads correctly.
So like you don't show them and tell them.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying? Like in comics, you don't show something and tell what's going on in the frame in the same frame.
Yeah, but also that you want to make sure that at the base thing, entertainment is actually the secondary thing. The first thing you have to be doing is telling the story correctly, and telling the game correctly, or telling how the game plays correctly is more important. So that analogy carries over to game design when you're thinking about pitching your prototype to a prospective publisher, that you don't want to show them all this awesome artwork, really, because A, they're going to change it if they publish it. They hire their own people who are invariably going to be better than you. unless you're a professional artist. And B, they don't really care about the art or the theme so much so as they care that the game plays well and that they can see that the game plays well within the first 5 to 10 minutes of play. Because when we pitch people at conventions, you don't have an hour or two to play the whole game for them to understand it.
One round.
You have one round. You have like 5 to 10 minutes. You have an elevator pitch of 5 to 10 seconds really to get into their foot in the door and say, hey, are you interested in a game about area control, worker placement in a medieval town? And they might say, hey, that sounds interesting. Show us how a round plays.
No, the door's open.
If you can't play that round in about 5 minutes without them asking millions of questions and not getting it because your graphics aren't conveying what you want them to, then you're kind of SOL. So you need to be really clear on what you need to do. Yeah.
We have an interesting word. There's a difference between clean and simple. So we used to call it simple, and we realized that wasn't the right word. Clean is the right word, meaning you don't have to simplify it so that it's basic. That's not necessarily good, unless it's maybe a family game and that's our target. But clean means, like, you look at it, you get what it means after maybe understanding what the icons mean. Then just by looking at a card, you know what it does. And Race for the Galaxy, for example, it's not as clean because it's so icon heavy. It only rewards players after 4, maybe 5 plays. When you start to get familiar with it, then it's good. But that's a hard one to get into and a hard one to show people. Now, that said, what Sam was saying about the art, sometimes we do, and it's still just clip art, but for a game of ours called Swashbucklers that got picked up by Queen, who we decided to, it's about pirates, and so as we were like Googling images for pirates, we found some anime female pirates, and so we like, let's just use them. And so through all the play rates and all this stuff, there's just these anime female pirates, and I think that might have had a hand in like making it more attractive of a game.
Maybe. Who knows?
Maybe, yeah, exactly. At least it's like, it looks different than just, it's pirates. And it looks a little bit more lighter because the game's a bit lighter. So that worked in our favor. So definitely, when you're Googling images, you definitely want to have a theme that helps convey and sell your message, but Google image, that's it.
Yeah, so if you know who Ryan Nitzia is, he's one of the most prolific designers in the world. He just actually comes to the table with a mathematical formula for
Pretty much, yeah.
Wow.
There's numbers 1 to 7, there's 48 cards, and you do this with them. And that's what he sells to the companies.
Often, yeah.
Oftentimes. It's not a whole... And then there's camels in a desert. Except that one was.
No, it wasn't. That was the campground. That was right. Through the Desert was like totally different theme. Something about campgrounds or something like that. And then the publisher's like, how about deserts?
Yeah. So there's ways to make a game that don't involve all the labor-intensive process of graphic design and illustrate. Well, see, graphic design, yes. Illustration, no. Those two different streams.
Are we answering the question? Are we going off track here? We're just kind of rambling now.
I find it great.
Yeah. This is good.
Well, that's good.
But I do have questions.
I'm going to say with another question.
Yeah, I do. Bring us in.
We'd like to know what, say, some of the major conferences in the North America trade shows that you'd like to attend.
Okay, which trade shows? So the very first trade show we went to was GAMA. Now, as GAMA is the Game Association, I don't know what it stands for. Basically, it's a trade show for retailers. And I don't know how we got wind of this show, actually. I can't remember how we got wind of it. Somebody got wind.
I do know. Yeah, so GAMA is the Game Manufacturers Association of America or something like that. And we had pitched to a company, and they said, well, why don't you go to GAMA?
Oh, right.
Okay.
Yes, that's right.
It's in Las Vegas it used to be
March-ish.
Yeah, so it's around now.
It might have passed already. So basically, that was our first one. We went to that 2 years in a row, and that's how we actually signed Belfort, was at the GAMA show. And they didn't sign it right then and there, but they said, we want to publish it, give us 6 months to develop it, and then we'll get a contract going. So that was how it happened. But basically, it's a slow show. Like it's just retailers going from booth to booth, and publishers going, hey, buy a box of my games and bring it back to your store. So because of that, it's super slow. As a designer, it was a fantastic opportunity to get a lot more time to walk around and not be bombarded with a million people like at Essen. So that was a good one. We haven't been back, mostly because we've been invited to the Alan Moon's The Gathering of Friends.
Alan Moon made Ticket to Ride, you know that thing. That whole bunch of them.
Yeah. And so that's like an invite-only thing that you have to get a special blah, 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 and all this stuff.
You have to get like 6 newt tails and an eye of a frog or something like that.
And through Twist of Fate, we ended up getting invited. So I went last year, and that to me was my best use of my time because publishers are there, and it's very informal because of the invite only. I guess maybe the caliber's a lot higher. I don't know, but that's hard to get to, obviously.
Well, I think why it is because that their only job there is to actually play games, whereas their job at some of the other events like Gamma or Origins or Gen Con or Essen is to actually sell.
Yeah.
So they have a totally different viewpoint of their time. It's more relaxing. It's more like, hey, let's see what's out there.
And then I went to BGG Con a couple of years ago, and that was mostly because it was it coincided with the launch of our first game, Train of Thought, that came out, and so I went there and kind of demoed it the whole time. It ended up being the number 2 rated game of the convention, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's nice.
And at that year, there wasn't tons of publishing, so I wouldn't recommend going, except for I saw last year, there was a lot of publishers actually.
Yeah, because of feedback.
Feedback that they wanted more publishers.
So there's a designer alley now.
And then, well, there was a designer or something.
Yeah, but it's a prototype alley now.
I can't even go on the say recommend that one or not, but I know I think it's already sold out or something.
Yeah, BG Con happens every year in Dallas in November.
After Essen, yeah.
And so that's another one that we would probably put into our rotation. Essen one year, BGG Con the next year. Gathering of Friends is in April every year.
I'll always go to that, yeah. Essen definitely was, I mean, that's obviously in Germany, but that was definitely a good use of our time. We signed Swashbucklers from doing that one and made some more contacts.
And
in the industry
as well, kind of do that.
It sounds like you need to be like a part of the jet set to get around all these conventions.
You do and you don't. You can get away without it, but the very best way to do it is to go to the conventions, to be completely honest.
100%.
Cold calling or cold emailing people can get you signed. It's happened. But it's still such a small industry and such an intimate one. It's actually quite incestuous when you know who knows who the other people. Getting in front of a person, putting a face to a name, playing with that person, because rules, when you write them down in English, and as a college professor, I know that people don't write all that well anymore. That when you do put a set of rules, they're subject to interpretation, right? And they may play the game they may play the game wrong and may have a suboptimal experience with it. Whereas when we go and play with them at the convention, we can assure them, and then we can also show them what type of people we are. I'm in a position where I accept people to professional programs all the time. I say, yeah, you can come, no, you can't. And my job there is to say, who would I like to teach? Or who would I want to work with in 2 years as a professional? It's the same thing in this relationship that you build with a publisher, that you want to let them know that you're a person that they can work with. There are designers out there who have basically killed their careers as a game designer because they are hard to work with.
What do you guys think is pretty much the number 1 trait you should have when talking with a publisher and pitching your game?
Anyone?
A really good trait to have.
You should be able to listen to the publisher thinks of what your design is and be able to take that feedback in a non-critical way. So that's
give the man a prize. That's absolutely right.
Sen, you're just pointing right at him, by the way.
I see because I see a lot of people pitching at all these other shows too, and people just get super defensive super quickly, as if it's like their baby, and it's just hard to watch that because they're just shooting themselves in the foot. Like, no, this has to stay this way, or oh no, we did this because of this, and they're like defending their reasons. Whereas immediately you should just go with it, whatever they say. And it's funny how you do that, and that's how Belfort got signed, because they played it, they liked it, and they said, we don't like how the turnover goes. What happens if you did this? I'm like, oh, that's actually pretty interesting. Even if we tried it that way, I'm like, that's pretty interesting. And I remember the next day we actually played Belfort again, and we tried with their way, and it actually was better.
Yeah.
So it says then it shows them that this is somebody I can work with. This person's easy to get along with. So charisma, yes, but more importantly is this just ability to listen and take that feedback.
Yeah. What do you think your job is as a game designer? Hey, we've turned the QA in reverse. What do you think your job is as a game designer?
More minutes.
And just what is your number one thing to do? What do you think it is?
Design games.
Design games.
Design games. What else was it?
Sure, that's a good one. So design a good game, and then what?
Sorry.
Pardon me?
Playtest.
Playtest.
Playtest. Yes. And what does playtesting do?
Reveals flaws.
Reveals flaws.
Reveals flaws. So yes, I think you captured it there in those couple of sentences. That your job as a game designer is to make a good game and then make it better, and then make it better, and then make it better. So the iterative process of game design is critical. So your playtest team is critical as well. You want to be able to get and receive that feedback, parse through it, take what you need, get rid of what you don't, make an iteration, playtest a game. And that's, again, the type of thing that the publishers are going to want to know. Hey, have you ever played it this way? Or do you think it would work with 4 people, or 5 people, or whatever, 8 people? They want to know that you've done your homework and that you're not wasting their time and that you're not expecting them to do a lot of the work. Game publishers don't buy ideas, they buy games. They publish a game. They won't just say, hey, you have a great idea, let's take it and we'll make it into something. Yes, they'll develop, which is what they did with Belfort. They took kind of a 90% done game and then worked on the extra 10% with us.
And to clarify, we thought it was at 100. Like, we were
For sure.
confident it was
Let's
100.
go, ready to go.
But through the development process, they just tweaked some costs here. What if this cost 1 more, or we gave this benefit to this thing, and tweaked a little bit here and there.
And it's actually kind of a nice process to go through. Sometimes it's frustrating, but a lot of times it actually ends up that the game becomes that little bit better that you couldn't get it done yourself. And it's a really neat process that we went through with Belfort because we worked all online. We've never met, well, we actually know the other people just from meeting them. But we really worked hard with the development team and the art team to make a cohesive product. And that's not always going to happen. Sometimes, like right now, we have a couple games that are sitting with publishers and they say they're working on it, but we haven't really seen hide nor hair of what they're doing.
And they have the right to do that. It might come out tomorrow. Here's the game. It's all finished.
Done.
No, we don't know. We'll see.
We'll see.
It's learning for us, too. That was just we've only worked with one publisher to an end game so far, so we'll see what it's like to work with other publishers.
Yes. So yeah, be prepared to develop further, but also be prepared to kind of sign away your creative control.
I found, just to go back to the question about the conventions, the conventions are great, I find, for Sen and I, because we have some versatility in the fact that we like to design many types of games all over the place. So we often bring 7 to 10 game prototypes with us that are ready to go, that are everything from party games, kids games, strategy games, and word games, or whatever. And so that, when you're at a convention, you talk to and you target a specific publisher, then you bring out the ones that are specific to that publisher. I think you would like these 2 games, and don't show them everything. Just know the publisher, show the ones that are appropriate to them.
Do your homework.
Do your homework in advance. And you're like, oh, this, okay, so I'm going to go to this game, I'm going to show you these 2. And I actually had one publisher say, oh, thank God, as people that show me their whole suitcase full of everything. It's frustrating. So it's definitely recommended. Then we make what's called a sales sheet for every single one of our games that we pitch. It's a 1-page review with some nice pictures that helps me as a pitcher actually explain the game without bringing out all the components. I can just go on this turn, you do this, and then he's trying to do this, and you see how it happens here. And it's got the other information about the game on the how many players and a little blurb about it, about what's hot about it, what's interesting about it.
Maybe the components,
Yeah.
the age range,
Something
the
you
time
can take back
factor.
from. And sometimes at conventions, that's all they want. They're like, this is great, I'm going to take this back. And sometimes we've heard from them saying, yeah, now send us the rules or the prototype. And sometimes we never do hear back from them. We try to follow up or whatever. But the sales sheet is guaranteed a necessity in our minds. We will not go to a convention without sales sheets for each of our games. It just makes pitching so much easier. And it's more casual. You just have a little binder, you flip it open, you flip to the games, and they go, no, yeah, oh, that one's good, I'll see that one, no, yes, and that one. So we'll see those 2. Great. And it's super quick.
Yeah, if you can't see us anymore, it's because our lighting went out.
Oh.
Yeah, you just got a bit dimmer, but that's okay.
Okay.
I was wondering if we could just go back quickly to the playtesting. In terms of design versus playtesting, obviously playtesting takes more time. So how much playtesting do you guys actually do before to get to the point where you thought the game was at 100%?
Well,
is it possible to quantify that?
We think it's at 100%.
Yeah. And then we play test and we find out that other people, like I said, can interpret things very differently. So some of it's, the next iteration is either clarifications in rules or graphics, and invariably because of the people we play with a lot, other designers and pretty hardcore gamers, they have input.
Yeah. I'd say the best thing to do is playtest with other designers. So when we had Belfort come out, we didn't know any other designers really.
Nope.
And so we just did it all on our own, and then we joined a group called the Game Artisans of Canada, and they have chapters all across Canada, and we became part of that group. And then for every game after that, every game we played with them, you just get different feedback from other game designers. And you definitely can't have this attitude of like, I don't want to show anybody my stuff because they'll steal my ideas. You cannot have that attitude in this industry. A, it's so small, and B, here's a secret, everybody has ideas. And I don't want your ideas. I think my ideas are better than your ideas.
My ideas are definitely better than your ideas.
So don't worry about that, because it's helped us. Maybe it's hurt us here or there, maybe, I don't know, but it's helped us a million times fold of just the kind of feedback you get, because from game designers, you're going to get feedback of, and they're going to understand a little bit about if this changes, that might impact this, so you also might have to look at this. Not to say that the feedback from mom and pa and sisters and kids and all this aren't important, because that's important too, because that's also important from the perspective of like, oh, this, I don't even get this.
Who's my customer?
Which a game designer might totally get, but somebody, we just happened to us last night when everyone was playing, and somebody's like, I don't get this component, so it's good.
Oddly enough, that was a game designer.
Oh.
But anyway, yeah, so playtest as much as you can with as varied a population as you can, because target audiences are different, right? Right now on BGG, there's a nice thread on there about, I hope you guys, if you're game designers, you do hang out on Board Game Geek every now and then. The forums there are pretty good. Our BGDF, Board Game Designer forums, are also good for getting feedback or getting ideas. But one of the threads right now is about playtesting specifically and how people are polling their playtesters and how to be a good playtester, how to teach playtesters to be good playtesters. So if you have a dedicated group, that's wonderful, but you really need to do what's called blind playtesting, where you just ship out your game to some other group who don't know you from Adam, and with the rules. And they read your rules and they play your game in the way that they think it should be played, without your input or even having you standing next to them.
And you do that at the latest possible, so like after you playtest the heck, and you really, maybe you played it once or two or three times with your group, and you've made hardly any changes, that's when you know you're getting closer to finish. You're like, okay, well, I'll just change this file, change this, and like, okay, well, we didn't change too much. At that point, you then send it out. What you're really playtesting is your rules, not really the game at that point. You're playtesting to make sure the rules are written out well, and see if they played the way that you wrote it. And oftentimes, it's not true. You actually, they play different, because it's like, oh wow. Even with Belfort, it came out published, and we went through the rules so much that there's still people saying, what about in this instance? What happens now? I'm like, wow.
Oh, one of the things was actually, and it was localization. It was how Canadians think of rounding up and how British people think of, or majorities. It was weird. It was just, well, that could also mean this. And it was just a little bit, some ambiguity in how things are ranked in sports in different countries.
Interesting. We have a question here in the room.
Yeah.
So, playtesting is important, and you have to get lots of different kinds of playtesters. But how? Let's say you're not a member of like a board game or a game designer, group. How do you get testers? How did you guys get testers in your early days?
Well, there's a couple ways, and we play with a lot of people, so
they often play tests for us, just
friends. But the other thing you can do is, the lights went out again, is you guys are in Toronto, right?
Yep.
So Toronto at Snakes and Lattes on Monday nights, the third Monday of every month.
Yep.
There's a game designer night. Which you can go and get your game play tested by other designers, also by just people who are playing games at Snakes and Lattes. So I hope you know about Snakes and Lattes. It's a wonderful place. And that would be one way to get some people who you don't even know playing a game, which is great, because then word of mouth starts spreading.
Otherwise, I have a regular game night in my game store, and
not one he owns, the one he goes to.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, one I go to, the game store I go to. And every once in a while, I'll bring one of my prototypes just to play with whoever shows up on game night to see if anyone's interested in that. And oftentimes, maybe now because we've got the games published, but even before we got games published, people were playtesting games with us. So that's just general public. That was nice. You have to do a bit of recruiting, like, hey, you should try a game about blah, 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 and that's where your pitch comes in, because now you're not pitching to a publisher, you're pitching to a playtester because you want them to play and you want it to be a good experience. And one of the key things about playtesting is you can stop it, and you should stop it when you've got enough information and the rest isn't going to help. You don't have to finish every single game. If you're like, okay, you know what, this part's broken too much, and it's just the rest of this is all the feedback's going to be about because this part's broken, so let's just stop it right here.
Yeah, and it's a good point that Jay makes about recruiting, because it's basically a dry run for your elevator pitch. The other thing that you have to remember to do is not be too forceful, too forward with your attempts. You know, people say no, just go with that. That's fine. Play published games. One rule of thumb that we follow generally is for every prototype that we play of our own on, say, a game night, we'll play like 3 or 4 other published games. And if you're in a meeting with other designers, for every prototype that we put on the table, we want to participate in at least 3 or 4 of other people's games, so we don't dominate, even if we have 7 prototypes ready to go. You just need to spread the love and don't be too greedy.
But there's other resources out there. You can use stuff like meetup.com and create your own meetup group of like game designers and see who shows up. And that will guarantee you'll get some people interested to come out.
Tabs Toronto Area Board Game Society. You might link up with them and see if there's people who would be willing to play test for you. You can, on BGG, there's groups that will playtest for you. They're more than happy to do it. You just need to ship them a copy.
And sometimes you can just email them the PDFs and they'll print it out.
They'll print and play it. Or if you know people in other countries, or let's say you moved away from your hometown to come to university in Toronto and you stayed here after for work, then you could email your game group back at home with a PDF. They print it out, play it, send you back some feedback. There's all sorts of ways around it. I mean, Jay, I don't know if you know this, but, well, you probably do from the bio, but Jay lives in Vancouver and I live in London. Right now we're in London. And we do 99% of our work over the internet. So through things like Skype, through things like our forums, through things like Basecamp, through Dropbox, all sorts of Google documents, all sorts of ways to share information. FaceTime allows me to watch him do the play tests when he's play testing.
You've done that, that's fantastic.
So it's wonderful. Technology is a wonderful thing, so use it to your advantage.
Great.
Question. I don't know if we answered it, but...
Are there other questions?
We answered some.
Going back to the first question, after the 25th iteration or whatever it takes to get there, how clean is your prototype when you go to these trade shows or make a pitch or send it out for playtesting?
Do we have any?
We might have some parts. So yeah, not very or very, depending on how you look at it. It depends what eye you're looking at it through. If you're looking from an illustration perspective, it's not. It's clip art and sans serif font all over the place, like just Helvetica font, because we want it to be as clear and as interpretable as possible. Interpretable is not the right word, so you want it to be as clearly interpreted as possible, so that there's no mistakes amongst the players. We generally try to print as colorblind friendly as possible, which is another interesting thing. So my playtest group involves 2 or 3 people who are colorblind. So whenever we make prototypes, it's like, well, I can't play this game because I can't tell the difference between this cube and that cube. Oh,
here's something. So this is, can you see that?
Yeah.
Perfect.
So that's for act criteria that's got picked up by Philosophia Z-Man, and that's a player aid. So that's as clean as we get as far as, you can see how we try to iconography everything, like this does this does this. We give everything title, but everything is as little English as possible, and it's a nice reference. So nothing is crazy great art. It's all just arrows and borders and stuff. Nothing's crazy great. It's just clean
and organized.
Yeah. Well, here's the lovely swashbuckling lady pirate.
Oh, could you pull it back a bit, please? Oh, yeah, it's kind of hard to see.
Sorry. There might be a better one.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Beautiful.
And this is a player screen with this is the dice game coming from Queen, And so this is as clean as this one look, and this is just a nice little grid to show you what's in every die and blah, blah, blah. So, and a little turn order type thing. So that's pretty clean. This is, well, it's another thing from Acriteria. This is the player board, the main board at the beginning where you're going to lay tiles down around it. So again, nothing crazy. It's just
Would it notice that all our stuff uses as little English as possible, and it's mostly visuals because we hope for localization in other countries. So you do a little bit of forward thinking about that kind of stuff. Obviously, train of thought, not easy to localize, but Belfort, our graphic designer, worked really hard on trying to reduce the amount of text on anything other than the rules. So the cards do have some text and it had to be changed somewhat, but it wasn't so hard.
I also found a sales sheet. So this is the thing I was talking about, sales sheet. Do you see that?
Yeah.
So this is a game of ours called Clunatics that's currently being reviewed by Philosophia for potential picking up. And then you just got the pictures. This is perfect because I can say, first you do this, then you do this, then you do this, and then this happens. And we also got to use Sen's kid in it. Yeah, it's nice. And then over here is a little description of what makes the game so unique. And then, of course, our contact information. Here's an obvious tip that you wouldn't think needs to be a tip, but on every page of your rules and on baggies, in your box, on the box, just put your contact information everywhere if you're leaving it with the designer. It's unbelievable. One publisher actually told me that he has a game that he likes, has no idea who
No idea. That's another thing. For those of you who do decide to go to some conventions, hey, because you're in Toronto, HammerCon in Hamilton happens on my birthday, around November 2nd. That is my birthday.
That's a great opportunity.
If you plan on getting gifts for me, it's November 2nd. But what happens at that is an event called Protospiel North. And Protospiel North is just prototyping. Protospiel actually happens in Ann Arbor, Michigan in the summer. And there's one in Milwaukee that's happening right now, like literally today, I think. So there's all sorts of other game design events popping up all over the place.
That's awesome. Go to HammerCon for sure. Yeah. It's all game designers, and you're all sitting there for the whole day playtesting everybody's games. You get yours out. It's fantastic.
There's a whole other convention running alongside it. The Protospiel type is that. And last year there are publishers that do come. So Mercury Games was there. They're publishing one of our friends' games, Quarantine. They're Canadian. And in past years, Elfinworks has been there, and Lions Rampant.
Who played this game with you?
Elfinworks.
Elfinworks.
And not Lions. Well, Lions Rampant's branch. Target Grizzly will be there usually. So there's a lot of stuff going on that you just have to kind of get. It's like a subculture. You have to get into it to know what's happening. One of the comments I had about when you're packing for conventions, boxes are awesome. But Ziploc bags are better.
There's so many people are concerned about like making a box for their game and then making the box look like a finished, published game by putting stickers around it and all this kind of stuff.
We did that.
Yeah, we did that for sure. But now, literally, we just put things in a baggie. We just take the baggie and we put the label up on the baggie and everything, and that is it. And that's fine. I mean, there might be a little appeal value if your thing is in a pile and you're just blind submitting it. That maybe you want to go the extra mile. But when you're doing that in person and you're showing them the game, that's your appeal. The fact that they're like, I like this game, I want to take it back with me.
Yeah.
So that's totally perfect.
Yeah,
and you fit way more in your bags than your.
It's more for the travel thing, because if the publishers are traveling from Germany or even just another part of the States or Canada, they have a luggage allowance. And
they want to take those boxes back.
They'll actually
Actually, I have a follow-up question too. When you take contents out of that Ziploc baggie, you said you have about 5 minutes or about a round of a game to show what's going on. I assume that's fairly difficult to set up and choose exactly what point in the game you want to show people. Or do you just randomly say, play now, go?
You set it up. You set the deck up in your favor so that it comes out the way you want it to come out for that playtest. Because you want the best possible playtest for that very first pitch, right? You don't want to be some weird exception, or not an exception, but because obviously your game shouldn't have those. But you want a nice, perfect balance of things to come up. So
so like let's say in a resource collection game or like a game like Magic the Gathering, you would never want to be mana screwed in the first hand, right? You wouldn't want to have no land or boxes or.
So basically, like for something like Belfort, I would pitch with the sales sheet. and to a point where they'd be like, you know, yeah, I'm interested, let's see that one up. So I pull it out, and then I would kind of put things together and just kind of show things and explain how they, and you go here and you go here, and eventually, if you're doing it right, they're like, yeah, okay, let's play around. Like, so you gotta kind of build it up and like kind of tantalize them, not with rules, because nobody likes rules, but you're like, and then you get gnomes and they unlock things so that you can actually get better buildings.
Ooh, gnomes.
So you gotta kind of tantalize them until you do it. Otherwise, if it's a quick game, then obviously that's a lot easier. But yeah, you can go right in the middle of a game. That's hard though, because then you gotta set it up because to a weird spot.
We've done speed gaming. We've taught Belfort in like 15 minutes and played through a round, teaching the game, playing through a round with not gamers, but not publishers, and that was a real test of our teaching skills and also setting it up. So you're right, yeah. If you can, at some conventions, you could buy a table as a designer for whatever it costs, and have your copies of your game, or just have your game set up to play with people. That's another way to do it. We don't ever really do that, but I've seen people do it. And then you can kind of have a preset scenario. If anybody here ever plays like Warhammer or 40k, they have a beginner scenario that says, okay, you have 5 orcs against my 5 space marines, and let's just go. And there's 2 pieces of terrain. And that's really all you need for most of the board game type things as well. Here's the hand of cards you have, here's the hand of cards I have, let's play the game.
There's too many times a designer wants to kind of tell them all the cool things about the game as far as like all the different strategies, and then this happens, and it becomes overwhelming. So you really got to find that nice balance of like, just like, you're going to do this, you're trying to get this, and this is the goal. And it's really cool. And then as they're getting acceptance into like understanding what's going on, then you can start giving them more. But it's a fine balance to, even the best way to do this is be the person that explains rules on your regular game nights, just to get good at explaining rules.
Yes.
That's really an art, because if you're terrible at explaining rules, you're going to be a terrible pitch person. You really have to get good at really condensing it, like, here's your objective, here's this, and do this.
Yeah, and really spend some time on writing your rules and practicing. And that's the practice part. I mean, I don't mean stand in front of a mirror and pitch to yourself. I mean, teach rules, like Jay said, to your fellow gamers.
Go to BGG Con, and they have volunteers that all they do is teach games over and over again in their gaming area. And go there and just listen to them and how they do it. What do they say first? Do they talk about the objective first? Do they do the theme first? Do they like really understand the best way to teach a game? And that's going to help you in your pitch.
Yeah, and in fact, that's the best way to promote gaming in general, is being a good game teacher. Nobody wants to sit and read rules no matter how short they are. They just want to actually get in there and play. That's the best way to spread gaming, but it's also the best way to sell your game, is to just play it.
Because you don't have to tell every single rule to the publisher. Just tell them enough to get going, and then because you're not playing to win, you're just playing to show them. So it doesn't matter. You can have cards open; it doesn't matter. So you can just show them this, and then you do this. Okay, now that you have this, here's this rule. Blah blah blah. So you can kind of give rules as you go.
Yeah, and if you hook them really good, they'll play the whole game.
Yeah, that's how
it has happened, and those are the games that get signed, or that have people calling us or emailing us a year after they played it, saying, "So whatever happened to that? Because we'd be interested in it."
Yeah, we had another publisher saying that about Acriteria. That was nice.
Yeah, so it's good.
I got one more question for you guys, and then if anybody has questions, because we should let you guys go back to your weekend-long, well, us here jamming, and you guys there. Oh, I guess you're also jamming this weekend.
Yeah.
I was wondering, because we get asked this often as organizers, people who make digital games kind of go like, oh, board games, whoa, 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 no, I make digital games. And I was wondering if you guys have noticed anything from people taking board games into digital realm, or even paper play testing, or any of that sort of activity happening in your experience?
Sure. So obviously the iPad has revolutionized social gaming and how games are perceived. So in both ways. So now you'll see things like games like Words with Friends have actually become real games. Like Hasbro makes Word with Friends, which is almost a clone of their own game, Scrabble. So it's kind of interesting. There's so many ways that Angry Birds has been marketed, like Angry Birds Jenga type things, and adding the catapult in there. So you see that cross trend. But what we're looking for, and the next wave of gaming that we see anyways, is appification of games. So you need a physical product, but you also need a smartphone in order to play it. So a game like, has anybody ever played, or has anybody played Space Alert?
Yeah.
So that kind of idea where it doesn't really need a smartphone, but it would benefit from one, in being able to have that timeline played for you while you're playing the board.
Agency is doing one that is one of the first games is actually going to require a smartphone in order to play the game.
Yeah, so there's definite trends towards making that happen. The thing that the smartphone does is it takes a lot of math out of the players' heads and runs it for you. And it takes a lot of the rules of orders of phases out of people's heads and does that for you.
I have a moderator sitting beside me.
Yeah, so a game like Ascension, the Godslayer, everybody play that?
Mm-hmm.
So the card game, I would never in a million years touch that game in its physical components.
A million years?
Well, maybe a million years if it was the last game on it, because it is very fiddly, very, 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 very fiddly about how everything is manipulated and how things go to the void and whatnot. But I play that game incessantly on my iPad because it does that all for me.
Super fast on the iPad.
Yeah, it's super fast and well organized, and it runs smoothly, and I don't have to question, okay, does this happen next, or does this happen next? And it actually reminds you when you have points left to spend, which is great, because I forget that kind of thing. So, yeah, definitely the digital realm is merging. The lines are blurring between what is what.
And it's becoming an issue, too, when we're writing contracts, is that we got to make sure who has the digital rights for the game. And so there's options as a publisher, as a designer, when you get to that state where you're actually getting a contract, do you want that publisher to have digital rights? Most publishers now will have that in the contract that they retain digital rights nowadays. But you can negotiate that, and we did that with one of our games where we said you got for 2 years you have the digital rights. If you do nothing with them in 2 years, then we get the digital rights back. So there's room to play and negotiate, because if the company's never done anything in the digital world, then maybe you don't give them digital rights, right? Because then what are they going to do with it if they don't have any experience in that world? If they do have experience, then maybe you do give it to them, and that's great. That might be a good thing.
Yeah.
Things to be new things to be thinking about nowadays with
It's a brave new world out there for the digital stuff, and with the new Surface tablets that are coming out too, that it'll be as interesting because they'll take it again to a new level.
Great, thanks. Any questions in the room? Okay. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for taking time today and answering a lot of our questions and giving us tons of information. I think I can speak for everyone here. We found that really useful. See a lot of other audience. Thank you guys.
On our board game geek handles.
Yeah, Sen Foong Lim, all one word. I dare you to spell that right now.
And Jay Cormier, not my first name, just the letter J, Cormier.
And you guys have.
Or you can reach us at our website.
BamboozleBrothers.com.
Yeah, all one word. BamboozleBrothers.com.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much.
No problem. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.